Hello, my name is Gonzalo Rodriguez-Pereyra, and I am one of the tutors and fellows in philosophy in Oriel. I have two different research interests. One is metaphysics, the other one is history of early modern philosophy, that is 17th century philosophy. And there I tend to concentrate on philosophers like Descartes, Locke, and Leibniz. One of the roles of metaphysics is revising and correcting our way of thinking or conceptualizing about the world. There are innumerable examples of this. Now, one of my main interests within the area of metaphysics is resemblance or similarity and its relationship to the concepts that describe things. For instance, in ordinary life, we say things like, these two apples are red and they resemble each other because they are red. Or we say things like, these two coins are round and because they are round, they resemble each other. Now, there are many, many reasons to think that that way of thinking is unlikely to be true. And as I said, one of the roles of metaphysics is to correct and revise our ways of thinking and conceptualizing about the world. In other words, it is to diagnose when our way of thinking about things has gone wrong and to say what is wrong with it. But of course, diagnosis cannot be the last word. After the diagnosis, there must be a proposal to replace that conceptualization of the world. And that is what I have done in my research in metaphysics. I have proposed that the right way of thinking about resemblance and the concepts that describe things is exactly the opposite. So it is not that two apples resemble each other because they are red. It is not that they are similar because they are red. It is exactly the other way around. They are red because they resemble each other. They are red because they are similar. And similarly in the case of the coins, it is not the case that they resemble each other because they are round. No, they are round because they resemble each other. Now, of course, saying this sounds odd or even absurd, and certainly the view faces many, many objections. But I have argued that those objections can be answered and the view can be supported. So in the history of early modern philosophy, although I have written on Descartes and Locke, I have concentrated mainly on Leibniz, and actually my second and third books have been on Leibniz. Indeed, very recently I published this book, which came out half a year ago, which is a translation and commentary of Leibniz's Discourse on Metaphysics. The Discourse on Metaphysics is one of the most important philosophical works ever. Leibniz is an extremely interesting metaphysician. He has very, very strange and interesting views. For instance, one of the things he believes is that things never causally interact with each other, although they behave as if they did. And this is his famous doctrine of the pre-established harmony, right? So there is harmony in the world because things behave as if they interacted with each other, and that means that the states or the states of a thing or what happens to a thing corresponds to the states of another thing or what happens to another thing. But that harmony is pre-established, has been arranged previously, and it is not a consequence of any interactions between things because there aren't any such interactions. Why did he believe this? Well, he believed that everything that happens to a thing flows from the nature of that thing. But if that is the case, then there is no room for letting anything that happens to a thing be the result or the consequence of that thing's interactions with other things. There is a lot to be said about Leibniz, and a lot I would like to say about Leibniz right now. But again, I can't go on speaking about Leibniz, so what I am going to do now is to tell you very, very briefly about the relationship between my two research interests, that is metaphysics and early modern philosophy, and the relationship between my research and my teaching. In both cases, I see continuity. And this is because the history of philosophy I do, and the history of philosophy I think has to be done, is what I call philosophical history of philosophy. That means that history of philosophy is not simply an account of who said what, but it is a philosophical assessment of what philosophers from the past have said. And there is continuity between doing history of philosophy in this way and what I do in metaphysics, because whenever you do research in any area of philosophy, and I suspect in any other area of inquiry, you're not doing research in a vacuum. You're always discussing the results of other people's researches. You're always assessing other views and other theories. And so when I do metaphysics, I am assessing other theories proposed by other philosophers, and that is what other philosophers do when they do ethics, when they do epistemology, when they do philosophy of mind, or when they do aesthetics. And this is what I do when I do history of philosophy. I take a philosopher, like Leibniz, for instance, and I try to first interpret him, but then assess his views from a philosophical point of view. Now, let me go into the relationship between my research and my teaching. Again, I see continuity here. I tend to teach the things I do research on, and there is influence going both ways. My research influences my teaching, and my teaching influences my research. Indeed, this book, the idea for this book, arose from a series of seminars I gave in college to a set of brilliant undergraduates. And a few years later, when I was working on the book, I gave a graduate seminar based on the current draft of the book at the moment. And I benefited a lot from that seminar. The graduate students' inputs led to substantial improvements of my book.